Gadadhar Sivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
Because even after following such methods, one takes to fruitive activities again, unable to control its mind, which is contaminated by the very beings for stopping them and carrying out.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Welcome all to for the Nitya Bhagavata Sevaya session. Today we will hear a recorded class from His Grace Hari Sauri Prabhuji. This is from Canto 6th, Chapter 2, Text 45 and 46. This is a recorded class. I just share my screen and start the class. Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we're on Canto 6, Chapter 2, Ajamil delivered by the Vishnu Dutas. Text, 45 and 46. I think 46 is on the board, so I'll just read text 45. Ajamil was a Brahmana who, because of bad association, had given up all Brahminical culture and religious principles. Becoming most fallen, he stole, drank, and performed other abominable acts. He even kept a prostitute. Thus he was destined to be carried away to hell by the order carriers of Yamaraj. But he was immediately rescued simply by a glimpse of the chanting of the holy name Narayan. So text 46, somebody can read the Sanskrit. Anybody read the Sanskrit? Yeah, go on. Nata param karma nibanda printanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat puna kamasu sajjate Mano Mradasamobhyam Kalilam Tatonyata Nata Param Karma Nibandha Kritanam Mumukshatam Tirtha Padanukirtanat Nayat punakama susajjate mano Rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyata Sajate Mano Rajastamobyam Kalilam Tatonyata. Ladies. Param karma nibanda kirtanam mumukshatam tirtha padanu kirtanat nayakuna karma susajate mano rajastamobyam kalilam tatonyata. Nata param kama nibanda krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanu kirtanat Mayat punakama susajate mano Rajasamobhyam kalilam tatonyata. Na, not. Ata, therefore. Param, better means. Karma nibandha, the obligation to suffer or undergo tribulations as a result of fruitive activities. Krintanam, that which can completely cut off. Mumukshatam, of persons desiring to get out of the clutches of material bondage. Tirthapada, about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all holy places stand. Anukirtanat, then constantly chanting under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master. Na, not. Yat, because. Puna, again. Kamasu, in fruitive activities. Sajjate, becomes attached. Manaha, the mind. Rajatamobhyam, by the modes of passion and ignorance. Kalilam, contaminated. Tata, thereafter. Anyata, by any other means. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, one who desires freedom from material bondage should adopt the process of chanting and glorifying the name, form, fame, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. One cannot derive the proper benefit from other methods, such as pious atonement, speculative knowledge, and meditation in mystic yoga, because even after following such methods, one takes to fruitive activities again, unable to control his mind, which is contaminated by the back of nature, namely passion and ignorance. Purport: it has actually been seen that even after achieving so-called perfection, many karmis, jnanis, and yogis become attached to material activities again. Many so-called swamis and yogis give up material activities as false, jagan mitya, but after some time they nevertheless resume material activities by opening hospitals and schools or performing other activities for the benefit of the public. Sometimes they participate in politics, although still falsely declaring themselves sannyasis, members of the renounced order. The perfect conclusion, however, is that if one actually desires to get out of the material world, he must take to devotional service, which begins with Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. The Krishna consciousness movement has actually proved this. In the Western countries, many young boys who were attached to drugs and who had many other bad habits which they could not give up, abandoned all those propensities and very seriously engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord as soon as they joined the Krishna consciousness movement. In other words, this process is the perfect method of atonement for actions performed in Raja and Tama, passion and ignorance. As stated in the Bhagavatam 1.2.19, Tada rajas tamo bhava kamaloba dayaschaye chetarita anavidam stitam sattve prasidati. As a result of rajas and tama, one becomes increasingly lusty and greedy. But when one takes to the process of chanting and hearing, one comes to the platform of goodness and becomes happy. As he advances in devotional service, all of his doubts are completely eradicated. Vidyate hridaya grantis chijante sarvasamshaya. Thus the knot of his desire for fruitive activities is cut to pieces. Therefore, one who desires freedom from material bondage should adopt the process of chanting and glorifying the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. One cannot derive the proper benefit from other methods, such as pious atonement, speculative knowledge, and meditation in mystic yoga, because even after following such methods, one takes to fruitive activities again, unable to control his mind, which is contaminated by the base qualities of nature, namely passion and ignorance. So, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the narration about Jamil. This is an important part of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada liked to lecture on this section of the Bhagavatam quite frequently. When we were in Hawaii, he spent 1 month going through all of this. Previous to that, at the beginning of 1976, Prabhupada was presented the first printing of this section of the Bhagavatam, 6th canto, first volume. Prabhupada was very happy about that. He received that from Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he lectured on that when we were in Nellore in South India. There were some pandals that were being held there in the early part of 1976. So the important point, of course, is that every living being in the material world is contaminated with so many different kinds of illusions about who they are, what they are, why they're here, what the place is that they live in, etc., etc. Well, we talk about the universe, but actually, what is the universe? Nobody really knows. The universe is a construct which has been developed by Krishna, the Supreme Consciousness, to accommodate the fantasies of the minute consciousnesses of all the living beings that are his parts and parcels. Beyond that, it's very difficult to describe exactly what the universe is. It's an area or a sphere of activity which goes on under the control of the Lord, but not directly, indirectly. The activities of the living beings are actually controlled, and as we see here with Ajamil, the sample living being, although he's been doing whatever he likes to do, or that he thought that he liked to do in his lifetime, and he had given up his connection with his spiritual or religious activity, so he felt that he was free to do anything that he liked, or rather, at least he forgot that there was any kind of control on what he was doing. At the end of his life, he found out that things were quite different. The state of consciousness that he was living in was simply an illusion. What he thought was enjoyment was not, actually. It was ultimately a source of difficulty and suffering for him. And he found that out just as he was about to leave his body. The little universe that he was living in was quite different from the greater universe that others were living in. So you have the appearance of the Yamadutas coming. They're living in the same universe, apparently, but their level of consciousness, their sphere of activity is quite different from the sphere of activity and the consciousness of the living beings on this planet. And if we look at the living beings on this planet, we'll see that each and every individual has their own sphere of activity, even though they're living within a shared space, just like we're all here in this room. So each and every one of us, we can say we're in this particular reality. But actually, individually, each and every one of us is in a different reality also. What I think and feel and will is a little different from what everybody else is thinking and feeling and willing. My words are coming out of my mouth, but each person that hears them perceives them a little bit differently. Same words, same space, but there's a little difference. So actually, what the universe is really the projection of every individual living being, which is being supervised by higher level living beings, and which ultimately is under the control of the supreme living being. There's a hierarchy involved there. Just like the example of if a man takes his dog for a walk in the park, they're both in the park. They interact together, but they also operate separately. What the dog perceives through his senses and how he interprets what he's perceiving through his senses is a little different from what the man is perceiving and interpreting through his senses. So the man's walking through the park, he's admiring, the layout of the flowers and the plants and the trees. He looks in the sky, maybe there's an aeroplane going overhead. He looks across the park, he sees an old friend, he waves to him, etc., etc. So he's got his, sense of reality. The dog is with him, and they also interact, but the dog's running around sniffing this place, sniffing that place, seeing another dog, being stimulated in his own way. So it's a little different also. So we're living in a kind of an interactive universe. Yeah, everybody's interacting with everybody else, and everybody at the same time is individual. So it's kind of simultaneously there's oneness and there's difference. So Ajamil, after living in his sphere of activity for some time, at the end of the duration of his body now, he was about to be moved into another reality. And there's living beings that come to enforce that upon him. The Yamadutas. The Yamadutas, they're living in this universe, but we don't perceive them. They perceive us, but we don't perceive them unless there's a certain requirement. So at the time of death, when this body is finished, that's when the Yamadutas make themselves apparent to ordinary living beings. Otherwise, they're invisible. They're living in a different universe. They have their own sphere of activity, their own universe, their own duties to carry out according to their perceptions. And we're here on this planet thinking, there's no God, there's no higher authority, there's no such thing as sin, right and wrong. It's whatever we decide, that's all. And we do whatever we like, and at the end of this life, then there's nothing. Then there's nothing. So people like to think like that, but actually the reality is a little bit different. There's another reality that's imposed upon them by a higher authority. And even their Yamadutas also are subjected to another higher authority, which they're now finding out, or they found out. They thought that they were the masters of the universe, more or less, because nobody can conquer death. And everybody in this material world has to die. And on death, then they're moved to another place. So who does that moving? The Yamadutas. They're the agents of death. So who can conquer them? They're all powerful, practically speaking. Or they can be forgiven for thinking that they're all powerful, because they know that they're the agents of Lord Yamaraj, but they think that Lord Yamaraj is all powerful. So when they came to, when they infringed into Ajamil's little universe, his state of consciousness, and made themselves apparent, and they were about to drag him away, then they themselves found their own little universes, their little sense of who they are, that was then challenged by the appearance of the Vishnu Dutas. The Vishnu Dutas, they live in their own universe. And they're also interacting with everybody else. So they have a higher state of consciousness, and therefore when the Yamadutas were challenged, or just the appearance of the Vishnu Dutas was a challenge to them. Normally when they go and fetch somebody, drag them out their body, nobody challenges them. Nobody can do anything about it. They're, all right, you come with us, that's it, finished. So for them to now discover that there was another universe with other living beings that were more powerful than themselves, that was quite a shock. You know, they were about to take Ajamil away, but then the Vishnu Dutas came, and simply by their appearance, the force of their elevated consciousness, it was enough to check the Yamadutas. They'd never been checked before, but now just by being there, these other living beings were stopping them from carrying out their duty. They actually became immediately overwhelmed by the force of just the mere presence of the Vishnu Dutas. And in that way then they became puzzled. What's going on here? We thought that Yamaraj was in control. Who are you guys? And then there's this conversation that's going on between the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamadutas, by which the Vishnu Dutas establish a higher reality. And they establish a link for Ajamil between him, you know, the universe that he'd been living in, and the one that they live in. They gave a connection, yeah, by their appearance there and by their claim upon him. Not exactly a claim, but they established that there was a link between themselves and Ajamil, which had not been seen or understood by the Yamadutas. So the Yamadutas were kind of puzzled. What's going on here? How is it that we now become powerless in the presence of these other living beings? So then, you know, there's this nice discussion, and then they go off back to Yamaraj, as you'll see in the next chapter, and then they have a discussion with Lord Yama, who's really the boss. Yeah, we always thought the universe worked this way. And Yamaraj explains, no, actually it doesn't, it works this way. So there's different levels of perception, there's different kinds of universes, they're all overlapping each other, interacting with each other, and ultimately it's just simply the state of consciousness that everybody's in. Yeah, that's what it means. A universe is the state of consciousness that you're in, and then the way that you deploy your consciousness through the particular set of senses and mind that you've been given by a higher authority. So in this way then, it's quite complex. Nobody actually can understand ultimately what the universe is. Yeah, even if we come to the level of the Vishnu Dutas, they're beyond this, what we call the material universe. They're living in the spiritual universe, but even there, you know, the primary feature of the spiritual world is it's all illusory. Not in the sense that it doesn't exist, but it's in the sense that everybody's consciousness is being manipulated and is interacting with this supreme consciousness, Krishna. And everybody has their own little individuality, their own individual relationship with Krishna. And the way that they experience Krishna is a little different from the way that everybody else experiences him. So Krishna is the ultimate consciousness, and he understands the consciousness of every other living being, but no other living being understands his consciousness. And that's the difference, and that's explained in Bhagavad Gita. That just Prabhupada often used this example that I experience a certain level of pain and pleasure in my body. Even if you see me or I tell you what I'm experiencing, actually another person cannot experience that. We only experience within our own limited field of consciousness. But Krishna experiences what all the living beings experience. His consciousness is everywhere, and it's on his consciousness that everything else rests. So he is the ultimate reality, and he is the ultimate conscious person. And all of us are limited part and parcels of that supreme unlimited consciousness. So now how to interact with them, that's the trick. If we don't recognize Krishna's authority, then it doesn't mean that we cease to exist, but it just means that he moves out of the picture for some time. He's actually always there, but we stop perceiving him. In the spiritual world, the only perception is of Krishna, and that, you know, a devotee understands everything is Krishna. He's in everything, he's everywhere, and there's nothing that can be perceived which is not directly connected to Krishna. But in the material world, Krishna withdraws that ability of perception. We become limited in what we do, and the limiting factor is the three modes of material nature, and particularly speaking, rajas and tamas. These are the lower forces, or modes we call. So modality, mode, force, whatever you want to call it. But it's a potency, it's the deployment of a potency by which a living being loses a certain level of perception. Yeah, he loses a certain level of perception. So we live on this planet. Let's take planet Earth as an example. We're living on this planet, but what do we perceive of anywhere else? Yeah, what do we perceive on the moon planet? What do we perceive on the sun planet or Yamaloka? We don't. We've lost that ability to perceive what's really going on. We've become limited, and the limiting factor is stated here, rajas and tamas. Yeah, it clouds our perception, it covers us over, it puts us into a stronger form of illusion. And then we act in various ways which we think are, you know, good or bad or beneficial for us, but actually, in the end, none of it's real. I was just reading the other day about one gentleman, I think he's a biologist, he'd been doing some interviews and, you know, looking into the idea of life after death. And there's one cinema critic in America. There's a duo, Ebert and somebody or other. Huh? Eberg? Siskel and Eberg. Anyway, they look at the latest movies and they give the thumbs up or the thumbs down or whatever it is. So this man, Ebert, as he was nearing death, after he retired, he started seeing things. He started seeing other living beings appearing to him. And nobody could understand what he was talking about when he tried to explain it. Yeah, normally ordinary people, they think when you start seeing people that that they can't see, they think you're hallucinating or going a little crazy. So they actually, you know, were thinking that now he's come to the end of his life, he's losing it. But actually he was starting to perceive another reality. And the moment of his death, just before he left his body, he wrote on a slip of paper which he gave to his daughter, "It's all a big illusion." This is a man, of course, that made a living from illusion. Movies are an illusion, creating illusions. Now he saw for himself that his own life was a total illusion and that he was moving on somewhere else. So that remains a mystery for, you know, the conditioned souls. Where do you move after this body is finished? What happens to you? Does anything happen? And the general consensus nowadays, at least, is that nothing happens. You just die and then you disappear, yeah, which is a ludicrous calculation. Why should something just disappear when even according to science, nothing is ever created or destroyed? So if nothing is ever created or destroyed, the energy that's there is always there. Then as conscious living beings, we're another form of energy. So why should we, you know, just cease to be? Logically, from a scientific point of view, it doesn't make any sense that something that exists can then not exist. Yeah? Everything that exists always exists, that's the fact. And the living beings, yeah, the state of their existence, that depends on desire. Yeah, it's mentioned here at the end. Prabhupada says that. As he says here, thus the knot of his desire for fruitive activities is cut to pieces. So what keeps us in these various states of illusion is our own desire. As living beings, to be a living being means to desire. If you have no desire, you're not alive. Yeah, life is desire. That's what it's all about, ultimately. We have these senses that gather information, yeah, and based on our desire, then we decide on what to do with that information, how to utilize it for either perceived good or bad. So in that way, then, our desire is what creates our little universes. Yeah, whatever we perceive, whatever we do, wherever we live, this is all a creation in response to our desires. So when the Vishnu Dutas chased off the Yamadutas, they didn't immediately take Ajamil back to Godhead or into their universe. Rather, they left him with his desires. They left him with his desires and told him, now you decide what you want to do, basically. By going away, now he had a choice. Would he go back to the prostitute? Oh, now I'm, been saved from death, I'll go back and enjoy again. Yeah, so-called enjoy. Or is there an alternative? And he'd heard this conversation going on, and he realized that his death personified come to take me, and now it's been checked by this higher authority, the Vishnu Dutas. So rather than ignore that, he decided that he would pursue it and find out more about it. And he was given the opportunity to do so. Yeah. He was freed from his previous sinful activities, but he was not yet given entry into the spiritual universe. So that was up to him. That's the pivotal point. It was his desire. Now you've seen the end results of your previous desires. Yeah, the desires that you developed in contact with the lower modes of material nature. You've had a chance to see what the end result's going to be if you continue with that. Or, we're giving you the opportunity now to come to a platform which is beyond death, which is beyond the influence of these Yamadutas. But not immediately. It's up to you. You have to decide what you want to do. So he was left there. So that's similar to Krishna and Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains everything to Arjuna, and at the end of it he says, Yatechasi tatakuru, you decide. Now it's up to you. Yeah? Whatever you perceive, whatever you've understood, now you must act. And it's up to you to decide on what level of action you want to take, how you want to think, how you want to, what you perceive. So all of us then are given that chance. This is the point about Ajamil, is that he was given an opportunity, but not just given it, he had to want it. That's the whole point. It's an interaction between Krishna and the living beings. We have to want to be with Krishna. We have to desire to be with Krishna. Then he gladly accepts us into his company. So we'll see that in the next couple of verses, Ajamil, he goes away, he finds a Vishnu temple, he resides in there, he serves the deity, he practices his sadhana, and he develops that seed of desire that he got from that contact with the Vishnu Dutas. And of course from his previous pious activities that he performed early in his life, he took them up again, and he began to develop a spiritual desire. And then at the right time, when that desire became mature, when his perception of Krishna filled his consciousness, then at that point the same Vishnu Dutas came, said, all right, now you're ready. Yeah, you've done the right thing, you have the right desires. Now you can join us in the spiritual world, in the eternal universe. Yeah. So the Bhagavatam then doesn't enforce on anybody anything. Krishna doesn't force people to believe in him. He doesn't force people to interact with him directly. But he gives us the choice. And that's what it means to be a living being. To have desires and to make a choice. And whatever choices we make, then we have to live with the consequences. So in that way then, How do you make the right choices? By hearing and chanting. Jamil became equipped to make a choice because he got the chance to hear this conversation going on between the Vishnu Dutas and the Yama Dutas. If he'd have been told directly, let's say the Vishnu Dutas appeared to him without the Yama Dutas coming, and they started to instruct him, now this is what reality really is, this is how you should act, he would probably have been incapable of understanding it. Just like we have in the 4th canto, the example of Prachina Barishat. He was told an analogous story, because he was incapable of taking direct instruction, so he had to hear it as a third party. This story is told about a sample living being, which is actually him, or it's akin to him and his activities, but it's about somebody else. It's a story about somebody else, because at that point he couldn't take direct instruction. So in the same way, our Jamil, he heard this conversation going on. It wasn't spoken directly to him. He was watching and listening, that's all. He was the subject of it, but he was not being given direct instruction by the Yamadutas, Vishnu Dutas. He was hearing it as the third party, and then he understood this is my life that they're talking about. So in that way then, gradually then he developed the ability, to hear properly and hear directly. And when he got to that point, then he actually made real progress. At the first point, he was cleared of the obstacles to hearing. He was cleared of the obstacles that he created, with his own activities. But he was not given entry, he was not given full understanding of the spiritual world. That he had to want, that he had to desire. And therefore he had to practice some sadhana bhakti and develop, to a point where he could keep his mind under control and keep himself aloof from that attraction of ignorance and passion. When he got to that point, then he was fit then to actually, enter into the spiritual world. Okay, so I'm going to finish at this point. Does anybody have any comments? Maharaj, nice to see you. Hare Krishna. Gita Nagari Prabhu.
I was going to ask you, just out of curiosity, if the Yamadutas, they carry people away to the hellish planets. If one is pious, is there someone who carries you away to the heavenly planets? I'm talking about the material.
Yes, as far as I know, they do. Any way you want to go in the universe is always under somebody's control, and if you want to enter into it, you need a visa. Prabhupada, uses that example that if you want to go to America or this place or that place, you have to be granted permission to go there. Therefore, he said they've never been to the moon planet. They don't have the adhikar, they don't have the qualification. So even if they went somewhere, they saw some dust and rocks. But that's not the moon planet. That's not the life. If you want to enter into the life, then you have to be accepted, as a fit member of the circle, and then you can enter into it. There's so many stories in the Puranas, sometimes about, an earthly living being that by some means or another became suddenly elevated to the position of Indra. And then all the other demigods decided this guy's not fit. Why is he here? And so they sent him back. Who was that was being sent up in? Shashanku. Trishanku. That's sorry, I can't remember all the details. There was an argument going on whether he was really fit or not. So he was being sent up and then sent back down, and then he ended up being suspended upside down in the middle. He couldn't do anything. So definitely you have to have permission from a higher authority to go anywhere. Even on this planet, we can't just do as we like, we need permissions. So as, dependent living beings, there's always a hierarchy, there's always a superior. And that superior ultimately is the one that decides, where we can go and what we can do according to, our previous activities and according to our desires. Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
I can't recall reading it in Bhagavatam, but in the course of Prabhupada's lectures on this particular topic, did Prabhupada ever mention... Is it on? Did Prabhupada ever mention what happened to Ajamil's Brahmin wife?
I never heard that, no.
Yeah.
What happened to Ajamil's first wife?
Yes, his first wife, because we understand that the wife shares in the punya of the husband. So I was just curious if by his elevation, you know, at the time of his death, whether his...
Maharaj, you know anything about that? Good question. I have no idea. I would have thought she would get an auspicious destination, though. Ajamil managed to rectify himself, and he felt guilty, you know, about the activities that he'd done, including abandoning his qualified wife. So certainly she must have gotten some consideration from the Vishnu Dutas. Yeah. They wouldn't have just abandoned her. So she would have got something there. But I've never heard it directly. I don't know. I'm just speculating. All right, we have a question from Rasika Sindhu Das from Mauritius. When Ajamil got a second chance from the Vishnu Dutas, then did he re-enter the same body to take bhakti on, or what? From what I understood, he was out of his body already. As I understand it, he was put back in his body. He was not actually successfully separated from his body by the Yamadutas. They were just about to do it, and then they were stopped. And so he was kind of out of body, but not disconnected totally from it. Then the Vishnu Dutas allowed him to re-enter the same bodily form. Then he went physically to the Himalayas, wherever he went, to the Vishnu temple. And then he practiced up until, you know, he was qualified to go back to Godhead. So yeah, he was in the same body. Last question.
Thank you for a wonderful class. We have so many unlimited desires moment to moment. And as we go ahead and we deepen our knowledge in spiritual life, what happens to the previous desires which are now insignificant for us? Is it possible to modify, or we are forced to accept the fulfillment of those desires?
Well, desire is an expression of consciousness, or desire is expressed through consciousness, rather. And if you change your desire, your previous desires, you're asking, they just evaporate. They're illusions anyway. It's like fog in the sunshine. As the sun comes up, the fog just gradually dissipates. Yeah? And as long as the sun is there, you're not going to have any fog anymore. So in the same way, if Krishna, you know, perception of Krishna increases, then the illusory desires that we had in connection, or that were created by connection with the lower modes of nature, they just disappear like fog. It just, you know, evaporates. They don't come back. You replace one kind of desire with a better desire, you don't go back to the old desire. It has no more significance and you disregard it. But it's not like desire is a separate entity from what we are. We are desiring living beings. So, you know, it's just a question of desiring the right thing, that's all. Then you don't worry about anything else. You don't even remember it anymore. Okay, we're going to finish there. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Hari Sauri Prabhu. Wonderful class. Just to summarize, a few points that I noted down is, Prabhuji mentioned, so initially Prabhuji gave the context about this whole pastime. And then some very interesting points Prabhuji brought up is about desires. He said that in our own desires keep us in illusion. And then yes, life is all about desires, but about we decide what kind of desires we need. And like Ajamil, he was so from Ajamil's pastime, this particular section, Prabhuji mentioned that, you know, after that conversation between Vishnu Dutas and Yamadutas, Ajamil was left to his desires. He was shown that what was the end result of his earlier desires, and then now he had a choice to have again, either a new desires or stay back in the same, go back to the same life, or change. And Ajamil, as we all know, after he understood, got to see the end results of what his earlier desires made, he took up to Krishna consciousness, and then perfected his life, and that was the second chance that he got. And so Prabhuji mentioned that, if we have to want. So basically, it's up to us that we have to have that need or necessary, that eagerness to be with Krishna, so that our desires should be accordingly, accordingly has to be aligned to that particular need or want. So so we have to make a choice, because we know, especially from this past time, we know what kind of choice, if we have, what is the consequence. So what is the best desire that we have? So the right choice comes by hearing and reading. That's what Prabhuji concluded. And example he gave was the story about Prachanibari, where the allegorical story that Narad Muni gave to him, so that it was not a direct instruction, but via that particular story. And to that, the last question that when Mataji had, Prabhuji mentioned that the previous desires, she had a question about what about, okay, we take up to the next, we take up that second chance, and then we realign our desires. What about the previous desires? So Prabhuji mentioned that eventually they disappear, like the fog. It's about like putting clear water in a dirty water. Eventually the water becomes clear. So that was a wonderful class by Prabhuji. Maybe if I would miss something, please share your thoughts and comments. Hare Krishna. Anybody would like to share? I'm sorry, the video was a little blurred, so please forgive, excuses for that.
Prabhu, you covered all the points. Prabhu, it was wonderful. Thank you for summarizing it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam. Thank you for summarizing the thing, Prabhu. It was a bit difficult for me to follow his accent, but you summarized everything, Prabhu. Thank you for
it's more about the desires. The whole pastime is about having the right desires.
Yes. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Dandavad Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Okay, if nobody has further comments or questions or thoughts, let's end the class with Vaishnava pranams. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Vaishnava Thakur Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Sri Baladi Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Quick question, Prabhu. Whether there is any final confirmation about schedule of His Holiness Bhakti Prachar Swami Maharaj?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. At the flyer, it says tomorrow and day after tomorrow will be 8 a.m. class.
Okay. So tomorrow we'll have, Then our classes, Nityam Bhavata Sevaya classes will be from the temple at 8 a.m. tomorrow and day after.
We can just look at the...
I didn't see the messages before we got back.
Yeah, so in the announcements in our community group, it is mentioned 24th and 25th March, Tuesday and Wednesday, will be 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Maharaj class we will have.
Yeah. And Thursday, Maharaj is not giving class.
No, I think Maharaj is leaving. Ramnavami, I think I'm not sure who's going to come. And that is evening either way, Prabhuji, the session.
Okay, Prabhuji.
It's an evening
So
session.
it's only the morning session, right? Evening there is no session. Right, Prabhuji?
And it's the schedule is evening. The program is evening on 27th. 4:30 p.m. onwards. Yes, Prabhuji. So morning we can plan, Prabhuji.
Okay, Prabhuji. So then it will be 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. We'll meet tomorrow next time. Same time. Sorry. Hare Krishna. Dandavad Pranam. I'll end the session.